My name is LJ Stambuk, and I'm the President and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. It is my pleasure to greet you here today. The Ambassador of Spain has been to Charlotte before, and we've met. And I told myself, of all the ambassadors I've met, this is the one ambassador I want to make sure comes and visits us and talks to us. We're very fortunate that in his busy schedule, Ambassador Gil-Casares has found time to come to Charlotte, and he's enjoying his visit with us. We had a wonderful dinner with him last night, and I can tell you all, you're in for a treat.
I'm Mike Hawley, a member of the board of the World Affairs Council, and it's a great pleasure for me to introduce to you today the Ambassador of Spain to the United States, Ramon Gil-Casares. The Ambassador, you've read, I'm sure, a lot of his biography, so I won't repeat much of it, but just to remind you that he's a career diplomat with over 30 years of experience in several Spanish administrations. He's a son of a diplomat, as is Lubomir, and he's traveled the world since his youth, and he's a keen observer of cultures, political systems, and international relationships. The ambassador's diplomatic career has taken him to the U.S. On several occasions. In addition to, I think he did a couple of years of high school in Washington, D.C., but he returned to Washington later in his career to do some work with the German Marshall Fund, and then also spent some time in New York at the Spanish consulate there. The ambassador returned to the U.S. When he was appointed as Spain's ambassador to the U.S. in April of 2012, so just over 2 years ago. Spain, of course, has influenced the Americas for centuries. The ambassador mentioned to us earlier that a Spanish diplomat doesn't really earn his or her stripes until they've served in Latin America. And he has done that primarily in Uruguay, but he's got an encyclopedic knowledge of Latin America, and it's a very impressive set of skills that he brings to the ambassadorial position that he holds. He's also served in the Philippines and more recently as Spain's ambassador to South Africa and then following that Sudan. So as you know, the World Affairs Council regularly assembles a group of folks that travels to interesting places around the world. A group of us intrepid travelers recently returned from Spain, World Affairs Council trip about a month ago. We were in southern Spain, Andalusia, and it turned out to be a most interesting and enjoyable and informative educational trip. And we'd encourage you to join us on those trips. They're really spectacular, many of you have. And it impressed on us what a fascinating place Spain is. The culture, the politics, everything about it is just spectacular, and some of which you're going to hear about today. The ambassador was gracious to have dinner with us last night. This is another opportunity that I'd like to mention to you. Many of our speakers come in the evening before, and we have a private dinner for them at the City Club, which is open to anyone that would like to attend, subject to the space limitations. But he shared with us many perspectives about Spain and the world, and it's an opportunity to spend some time with the great minds of our time. And certainly the ambassador is one of those. He's a visionary thinker with knowledgeable and intuitive opinions on issues ranging from governmental devolution to energy policy to international economics. I'm not sure exactly what he's going to talk to us about today, but I'm confident that we'll all leave here both enlightened and also the beneficiaries of some extraordinary global thinking, which is the mission of us here at the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. So if you would, please join me in welcoming Spain's ambassador to the U.S., Ramon Gil-Casares.
Thank you very much for your kind words. Let me clarify that I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge on anything before I go further, so as not to create a false impression. That said, it's an honor for me to be and to address the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. You know, every time I come to one of many councils, such as this one that you have throughout the country, I cannot avoid feeling a bit of envy for what you have been able to accomplish. You see, it is seldom that in Spain or in Europe, for that matter, mid-sized cities such as this one have civil societies that dedicate personal efforts and resources to enhance global thinking among their citizens. And that is something to praise. I am also aware that this council has received multiple recognitions, including the President's Award in 2008 for its extraordinary innovation, outreach, and impact. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to be speaking here today. And of course, I am going to talk to you about Spain. What else? And about some of the issues we face, and I hope I won't bore some of you a bit too much, because I'm going to include our economic crisis, the challenges of the European project, although I'll be short there, and since you're all expecting it, about the recent straw poll in Catalonia. And of course, I'm going to tell you about some of the projects that our two countries share. And let me start by going back 2 years. 2 years ago, you will remember, the word Spain had become a synonym of the word crisis. Our figures were showing a GDP decrease year to year of around 2.5%. Unemployment had skyrocketed to 22%. We had a high public deficit of more than 9%. There were problems in our financial system, and of course, our economy had become less and less competitive from the above figures. In July 2012, the risk premium of the Spanish bond reached the until then unimaginable figure of 630 points. And word had it that we're going to be the next country of the euro area that would have to be bailed out by the European Central Bank. Here in the United States, the situation was perceived in a very particular manner. Spain was seen in risk of default. Our Prime Minister had stated that he was, under no circumstances, going to ask for a bailout. And American economic and political pundits, and you have some of those, interpreted his words as a mere expression of foolish pride. Without a bailout, they stated, these proud Spaniards are going to go bankrupt. They are going to make the euro go down the drain. This is going to affect many European banks. Unemployment is going to grow throughout Europe, and that will have a repercussion on our banks, and what is worse, on unemployment, on our unemployment. And mind you, this was 4 months, just 4 months before the presidential elections of 2012. And as you probably know, no incumbent to the White House has ever been re-elected with an unemployment figure higher than 8%. So I had been in Washington for only 2 months, and all of a sudden I had become the ambassador of the country that was going to make President Obama lose the election. That was not a very comfortable position, as you can imagine. Well, 2 years have passed since then, and what is the situation now? Let me tell you. No one speaks about the euro being in danger. No one speaks of the need for a bailout program for Spain or for any other euro country. After 4 consecutive quarters of positive growth, albeit slight, Spain is not only technically out of the recession, but it has become one of the countries of the euro area with the highest growth rate. Competitiveness is back, and of course the risk premium is something nobody speaks about. During these last 2 years, the government has taken action in different fields. We've made a Budgetary Stability Act, reforms have taken place in the labor market, in the pension and financial systems, in the education and energy sector, just to name a few. These measures have had consequences that sometimes have been painful, very painful for many of our citizens. I am sure that you have seen the images on the media and have heard of the 2 general strikes that we had to suffer. But these measures, and we all understood it, have helped to curb fiscal deficits, to restructure and recapitalize our banks, and to stop the rise of unemployment. And we had to accomplish this in an extremely adverse environment of economic recession and financial instability through the euro area. But again, I'm glad to tell you that our efforts are paying off. After several years of financial collapse affecting banks, firms, and households, stability has been restored. The financial assistance program for the banking sector has been completed with good marks, and uncertainty about the fate of the euro has faded away. Let me put some flesh onto this. On July 2012, the Spanish Treasury was paying more than 7% for its 10-year bond. Today, the same bond is trading at around 3%. Foreign investors are buying Spanish assets again, lured by attractive valuations and good growth opportunities. The rating agencies, Fitch and Moody's, have recently upgraded their assessment of Spanish debt. And according to the European Commission forecasts, in 2015, Spain will grow above the euro area average at about 2.1%. The economy is creating jobs again, which has undoubtedly been our more daunting challenge. In the last year alone, we have 200,000 more workers who are contributing to our social security. Now, having reconquered stability and growth, we can now look forward with confidence to assess the challenges and opportunities of a new time. We cannot be complacent. The crisis has left several deep wounds in the social and institutional fabric of the country, and as I said before, I am going to speak about 3 of them. The most important one, as usual, is jobs. High unemployment is the heaviest burden we have inherited from the crisis. Improved finances mean nothing if they don't translate into a turnaround in the real side of the economy, especially when our unemployment rate is still around 21%. The government is in the process of taking additional measures to make our labor market more flexible and efficient, to create no figures of contracts, aiming especially at the youth. But there's an encouraging takeaway of this recent recovery, and that is the decrease in the growth threshold that we need to create jobs. And let me explain this. Traditionally, the Spanish economy, in order to start adding jobs in net, needed to achieve GDP growth rates of around 2%. Because of the effect of the major labor reforms of 2012 and the other structural changes that I've mentioned to you, it seems now that the threshold would now be closer to 1.2%. And this is not a minor technical point, as you will understand, for it will determine how fast we are able to provide jobs for those who lost them during the crisis. Perhaps our biggest challenge now is to act fast, to offer a prospect of opportunity to the current generation of young Spaniards, like many of you, we need to create jobs in sufficient number and to raise the quality of education, particularly of college education, to convince our young population that if they work hard, they have a future in their own country. Let me go to Europe. The test of the last 4 years has been tough for the euro area. At times, it seemed as if the whole building of the European integration was about to collapse. It has prevailed, but it will never be the same. The countries that belong to the euro have given a crucial step forward in setting up a stronger political and institutional foundation for the monetary integration. But it is also true that in times of economic predicament, many Europeans tend to blame the European Union for their woes. They turn to populist politicians that promise to regain sovereignty by drifting away from their neighbors and the common project. And you saw what happened at our last European elections. This is a threat, populism, to what we have achieved in more than 50 years of integration efforts. Spaniards are very well aware of the benefits of belonging to a community such as the European Union. We knew what it meant when Franco died to be welcomed by the European community all the time. But a new populist movement has appeared recently. But for Spain, the most worrying effect of this crisis has been the success of the mobilization of the secessionist parties in Catalonia. Let me, in a short way, explain to you what the situation is. This is a movement that resurfaced in the content of the recent economic recession. Following a disastrous economic policy waged by two governments in a row of the region in Catalonia, secession all of a sudden was presented as the only way to recover from the crisis. And the blame was put on the rest of Spain and on the government in Madrid in terms of an unfair fiscal balance, it was said. We pay too much for what we get. Spain, the government, of course, from the proportion, no, what they said, and I apologize, the sentence that was coined was, Spain is stealing from us. Let me remind you that Catalonia is the fourth richest region in Spain in per capita terms, only after Madrid, the Balearic Islands, and the Basque Country. But a new narrative all of a sudden was written on the history of Catalonia. A kingdom of Catalonia that existed a long time ago was presented. Catalonia lost its independence, some say, in 1714, and that led to the process of asking for independence. I won't go through the whole constitutional problem that was posed into Spain. As you know, last November the 9th, there was an unofficial straw poll organized by a sector of the civil society in Catalonia with the backing of the government. You know probably the results. This was a process where there was no legal basis, no official census, no official controls or impartial polling stations. But the truth of the matter is that more than 2 million Catalans cast their ballots. 80% of those ballot casts were in favor of independence. Now let me remind you that more than 2 million ballots represent less than 30% of the official census. That means that 2/3 of the Catalans decided not to participate in this unofficial and non-binding straw poll that had been organized by the secessionists. I'm sure we'll go to the question and answer time with more, so I will leave it at that. I don't want to bore you. The U.S. has been an essential partner for Spain during the crisis, and not only then. You see, the United States is an extremely important market for Spain, both from a trading perspective, but above all from a perspective of investments. The volume of trade between our two countries exceeds 2 billion euros, and despite the backdrop of sluggish economy, trade relations have systematically increased since 2009. The leading destination for Spanish exports of goods outside of Europe is the United States, and this dynamism is not only the export of goods, but also of services. Furthermore, the US is the third most significant destination for Spanish investments overseas. And of course, American investments in Spain are of paramount importance since you are the leading foreign investor in our country. I won't go into figures because maybe I'm speaking a bit too much. But I wanted to focus on something that I think it's important you hear an ambassador from a European country speak of. Last year, the European Union and the US launched the negotiations for a comprehensive transatlantic trade and investment partnership, the TTIP, famous TTIP. I think it offers a great strategic opportunity for the two biggest world economic areas to deepen its mutual beneficial ties and lead the way to in the multilateral arena for openness and rules-based trade and investments. The rounds of the negotiations, as you know, take place in Brussels and in Washington, D.C. And despite the process, the work ahead is still daunting. We're aiming for a new kind of economic agreement which encompasses tariffs, non-tariffs, barriers, but also regulatory cooperation and investment for the first time. It will take a lot of political will and a lot of creativity to come up with effective solutions to reconcile our differences. And also, and that's why I'm speaking here today, to convince the political constituencies of the benefits of successful completion of the ongoing negotiations. There are certain elements in this process that we sometimes forget, and some of them are the reason why Spain clearly supports this negotiation. Let me tell you. Trade between the two areas amounts to 500 billion euros per day, 500 billion euros per year, I'm sorry. The United States is the main trading partner of the European Union. Direct investments by the US in the EU amount to more than 1.2 trillion euros. A similar figure is that of the EU investments in the United States. The EU and the US economies represent 50% of global GDP, 25% of the world exports, and 31% of the global imports. The two economies receive more than 57% of direct global investments and represent 71% of direct investments in the rest of the world. You will understand that with the weight of both blocks together, it will not be difficult, as it was stated in the communique of the recent round of negotiations, and I quote, to devise joint approaches to rules that address global trade challenges of common concern. I am going to finish because they told me to speak 20 minutes. The relations between Spain and the US go beyond the mere economic ties. We share a common history in which we have waged war together and against each other with not too good results for Spain, as you know. Spain has been at the origin of many communities and cities in this country, just as American culture, through its literature, music, or art, has contributed in no small measure to shaping the Spain of the 21st century. And as a consequence, our two nations share the essential values upon which we both think our world and the coexistence amongst people should be based. This has led to very strong cooperation of security matters that I will not talk to you about. But I could not be able to finish, even though I'm being too long, without making a small reference to something you probably know and have been able to witness here in Charlotte. In the year 2050, and probably before, the United States of America will become the world's second country in number of Spanish speakers. Only Mexico will have more, and Spain falling to a honorable third place. The interest of our already common language in this country is such that Spain has become the third preferred destination of American students for the year abroad programs after the UK and Italy. And more than 26,000 young Americans are studying in our universities in Spain as I speak to you. In the same way, around 6,000 Spanish students attend classes at this hour in different high schools and universities in the United States. I myself, as has been said, had the opportunity to go through 2 years of high school in Washington, D.C., had a brother of mine who graduated from Georgetown, and a nephew of mine, a son of my brother, was luckier than both of us, and has an MBA from the Fuqua School of Business of Duke University. This fact represents an enormous opportunity for the strengthening of bilateral relations, and we have to profit from it. And on that note, I will finish, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I've interested you enough in my country just for some of you to think of investing in it. Some of you are visiting our cities during our next vacation, and many of you that are sitting here, the young ones, to think of adding a Spanish year abroad program to your curriculum. I can assure you, you're going to learn much, but I am positive you're going to have a great time. And I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now we will move to the portion of the show today, if you will, whereby since we have so many high school students here that we hope, and I understand you get extra points, high school students, if you ask questions. And I understand also at Collingwood Language, if you ask in Spanish, you get 5 bonus points. But I encourage, please, we'll now take an opportunity for the ambassador to answer questions that you may have, anything that you've been meaning to ask an ambassador. This is a good time to do it. So with that, we have a microphone here in the center. And so for those of you who do have a question, if you'll please queue up to the microphone, we'll take your question and let the ambassador answer them. To start off, though, since you are a product of 2 years of U.S. high school education, would you kind of compare and contrast for us the U.S. education process, what you experienced, with how the education works in Spain, as well as your university program and your high school program?
Okay, I'm so old that both the American and the Spanish system have changed since I graduated from high school. Your system was more creative, more open, it gave you more initiative. Our system was a bit more based on memory and facts. And I think both had their advantages. I think that the emphasis on memory when you're young and your memory works, not as mine right now, you keep many things in your memory that you don't if it's just creativity. Then it'll be better. And then I think, frankly, that the university systems are incomparable. This is one of the best university systems in the world, if not the best, the American system. Although the differences between the really, really big ones and the good ones and the not so good. And our Spain was, our system in Spain was basically public with not that great amount of money. We had few exceptional cases like our engineering company in which, because of the emphasis, and we were speaking about it yesterday, in mathematics, it seems that our engineers are pretty good and they seem to be very successful in the rest of the world. So.
Thank you. We'll have our first question, please.
¿Y qué haría España si separa Cataluña? Or what would Spain do
I've
if
understood
Catalan
you, believe it or
separated
not,
for the
yeah.
others? Yes, for the Americans.
I've not thought of it. It's like sort of unthinkable. And, I mean, Spain without Catalonia, it's not Spain. It would be a different country. We don't know what will become. Listen, it is true that at one point in our history, in the 17th century, the Catalans made a decision in the middle of a series of European wars to join the French crown, and they repented very much because, I mean, the different cultures between Spain and the level of centralism in France is much higher than that of Spain, so they came back. If by any chance this process would derail so much so that the unthinkable would happen, give them time. they'll realize that they're Spanish because they are. And I'm sure they will come back. But it's not going to happen. I mean, whenever I speak, I don't know if there are Catalans here, they might, apart from one that I know well. This is a very sensitive issue, and it touches emotions. And you touch emotions, emotions are not rational. And if it's not rational, it's irrational on both sides. So I try not to speak too loud or say things that can hurt, and I hope I don't hurt anybody. But what I wanted to tell you is that because it's emotional, if you think if you're crying independence because all of a sudden we're being abused by the government of Madrid, Spain is stealing from us. We had a history, and we were a kingdom that is in no history book. And we were invaded by Spain in 1714, and they bomb us every now and then and want to become independent. And you say, let's have a straw poll. 2/3 of the people don't stay home. And of those who go, only 80% vote. Though it's too much. It's 1,750,000 people that we have to understand that because they've been convinced that they're not Spanish. They don't feel Spanish anymore, and that's something we have to take on. But let me just give you a fact. In 1978, when we voted our current constitution right after Franco, the region in Spain that voted more in favor of this constitution than that reject was Catalonia. 92% of the Catalans that went to vote, and there was a participation of around 70%, voted in favor of the constitution. So peoples don't change in 30 years. Thank you very much for the question.
Es una pregunta muy importante. ¿Por qué solo, por qué 60% de la gente de Cataluña no votaron?
60% of people in Catalonia didn't vote because it had no binding effect, and because the very fact of voting would show that they were in favor of the process. Since you asked me, the Catalan government wanted to have a binding referendum, but that was illegal according to a constitution that was voted in favor by 92% of the Catalans. And in order to have a binding referendum, there would have to be a reform in the Constitution, much as is the case in the United States. Suppose tomorrow that Florida, North Carolina, for that matter, all of a sudden the governor goes, goes mad. They decide to have a referendum on whether they want to be Americans or not. That could not be legal according to the United States. The president could not accept that as legal. You would have to go through some type of constitutional process. Same thing in Spain. So the High Court forbade that referendum from taking place. So what they did say, okay, let's make an informal consultation, not with non-binding results. But it is true that it had non-binding, but it had political results and effects because everybody's speaking about it. So it was the courts also decided not to permit the referendum, but they went ahead anyway. And the government had the opportunity of doing two things, either enforcing the regulations of the other courts and sending the police and eventually the armed forces there, and then having the image, which is what they wanted, the secessionist of their employing force against us, poor, peaceful people. Or let it go, let it work. And it worked. And the reaction of the people that were against was not to go, not to participate. This was a travesty of a political process, and that's why they did not participate.
How do the different cultures, per se, or the new cultures that are coming into Spain currently affect the country, and how do you believe the country will play out over, per se, the next 50 years?
We are at a crossroads, so we're used to the multitude of cultures. I mean, Spain was a Muslim and Arab country for 8 centuries, as you know. We have 4 different official languages in Spain, apart from what you call Spanish, which is Castilian Spanish. We have Basque, Gallego, and Catalan that are spoken. And right now we have about 10% of the population in Spain are immigrants recently arrived. I don't think it's going to affect the coexistence among us. We're fortunate enough to have had the big chunk of immigrants that came to Spain were from Latin America. So, I mean, we share basically a culture and a language and a religion, and the second generation is absolutely Spanish, and so they don't create ghettos and feel bad for society. But even the African immigration, even though you've seen images that are harsh, but those are the ones in the border trying to enter the two Spanish cities in the north of Africa, Ceuta and Melilla. They've integrated pretty well. I don't think it's going to harm our coexistence, or is going to affect in any way the future of the country in a negative way.
Your Excellency, we're so very pleased that you're here in our fair city of Charlotte. My name is Janelle Coswell, and I represent International House, and we work with the Department of State to welcome international leaders from countries all over the world. And what I wanted to ask you is that you've stated that Spain and the United States have great economic and trading ties. How is it that we can increase the professional exchange and also increase economic ties between Spain and the city of Charlotte?
The professional exchanges, we're trying to convince the State Department to do something on visas, but I would not to put the issue forward here because it's not the place for discussion. And another thing that we have to do, this is such a large country, yours, that I won't say I spend half of my life, half of my time traveling, but a good fourth of my time I spend it traveling from state to state. I go where the concentration of Spanish interest is larger and when there's a larger Spanish presence, either cultural or otherwise. So I've been 7 or 8 times in Florida, 4 or 5 in Texas and in California, and I had been twice in North Carolina. But with North Carolina, we have to become aware, and we have to make a mutual effort. What I'm going to tell my commercial officers to come here and discuss with the authorities what to do. I mean, we have a big Spanish firm that we're all very proud of, Grifols, that are sponsored, and is the largest firm in hemoderivatives, which I didn't know what it was. It's the derivatives of the blood, and they do a process which is incredible, and they show it to you, and they have a big plant in Clayton. And then we have 2 or 3 small firms. But here, I've come to know 5 or 6 Spanish businessmen that were here. We were not aware of it. So it seems that there's lots of opportunities for our interchanges between Spain and North Carolina, and we'll work on it.
With SunTrust, I'm the Carolinas Treasury Executive, and we do a lot of business with Spain, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions, and I'd love to hear some expanded misconceptions. I've been to Spain and love the great things that we've exported from you guys. Probably sangria is the top of the list,
Okay.
but I'm sure there's some other things we could all add to that list. So within that, I think there's a lot of misconception upon the economic policies around trade, around the desires to connect our economies within that regard. We'd love to hear you expand upon your belief and your perspective of the misconceptions there.
The American products, you're asking me from the point of view of Spain and of the Spanish people, American products are very much appreciated. We had, tell you an experience I had. I took the underground. I had been 4 years in a row abroad. I took the underground one day from where I live to the outskirts of Madrid in the south, and we passed by an area that's basically full of immigrants. And all of a sudden, if you do that experience on the underground, the people change. In the wagon, you're sitting, when you come out, there's a gentleman with a briefcase and tie, and all of a sudden they start changing, and the tie disappears. All of a sudden they become younger, and all of a sudden that became multinational, and you had kids, teenagers, all dressed as if they were in the middle of the Bronx in New York, where I've lived, with I was going to say the Yankees cap or the Panthers cap, and with the Nike shoes, and the U.S. has prestige abroad. If you speak about American investments, people like it because they know it. I know whether I've said it because I've said it 2 or 3 times since I've been here. I always brag about it, and we're very happy that we're going to be exporting Ford cars to the United States. Ford has a plant in Zaragoza in Spain, and they've created a model for the American market that is going to be built in Spain. So there are many, from the point of view of the population, many attractives. Now, most of the leaders of the big Spanish companies have all started in the United States. If you go through Santander, Bilbao, Telefónica, I won't speak about Grifols, the big construction companies, most of them have had, like my nephew, an MBA from Duke or from Chapel Hill or from any of the others. So they know the US, they know the possibility of this market, they know what you're doing, they know the advantages we might have over you in some aspects, and I think they're interested in having the relations. And after the figures I've given you between Europe and the EU, if you don't think that it's tempting to do things together and to try between the 2 big economic powers to change the rules and regulations of the trade world after the failure of the Doha process, you would understand that it is obvious to me.
It's Ebola week at our school, and that means we get educated about Ebola. And so I just want to know what Spain is doing surrounding this topic, and also, are they helping out people in West Africa? Are they doing any medical aid around there? Or like, what is the Spaniard CDC doing?
2 of the first Europeans that died were Spanish priests who were medical doctors working in one in Sierra Leone and another one in Liberia. We sent a Spanish an Air Force plane to Liberia and to Sierra Leone. We took them to Spain, but they were over 60 and they passed away. In their process, while they were treated, one of the nurses, much as what happens in Texas, contracted Ebola. And it was a big scandal, much as what did we do wrong, where did we go wrong, whose fault is it, was it her fault because she didn't dress and undress well, was she prepared enough, were our hospitals ready to receive this virus that nobody knew about. So it was in the first page of Spain for a couple of weeks. Luckily, she was cured, and she's out of the hospital right now, and we've not had any more cases. 4 or 5 were identified as possible cases because they had been in contact with this lady before realizing that she had Ebola. She had gone to the hair salon, so the hairdressers were quarantined, but everything was solved. Are we doing something? We are cooperating with the rest of the allied nations. We've sent medicines and treatments and all these things that now are so complicated. The things that you get dressed on to Liberia. In the 2 Spanish hospitals that have been selected as hospitals for the treatment of these diseases, and lots of research is being done. At one point, the only 2 Westerners that had been contaminated were the first American and the two Spaniards. So both our administrations were very much in contact, and we're working on it. I'm not aware that we've sent, even though it was ready to be sent, a hospital to, I think it was going to be Guinea-Conakry, but I'm not sure that it's been sent because according to the last, and you know more than me, the figures have stabilized You know, Ebola is always the same thing, only it was a bit more scandalous. It goes up, and all of a sudden it disappears, the mobility disappears. So right now I think we're in a sort of a wait and see. I haven't dealt as seriously as I had 2 weeks ago with Ebola recently.
Thank you, Ambassador Ramon.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Andy from Charlotte Country Day.
Andy, how are
So, yeah, I was writing a research paper a couple of days ago, and I found out more than 10% of the Spain population are actually immigrants, which means they're coming from other countries, especially in North Africa. And I know the government of Spain is trying to improve the employment rates for your own citizens. So how do you kind of balance out those 10% immigrants and those 90% Spain citizens so all of them can get a job?
As far as the policies is what I told you. We've made a couple of reforms and we're hoping for the European Central Bank to have a more flexible monetary policy. As you know, you can only work when you do economic policy, you work with two tools. One is the fiscal one, the other one is the monetary one. The monetary one, since we belong to the euro, is in the hands of the European Central Bank. And if we could flood the market with dollars as the Americans did here, we would. But there are countries in Europe that are very concerned with inflation and they don't allow that. So we worked with the reforms and the fiscal policies. That said, the 10% of immigrants that came to Spain came at a time when the unemployment was not that high. It was about 7.9, around 8%, and they stayed. When the crisis has come, they've started coming in waves as they did previously, and many of them have become Spanish because most of the people that belong to the Spanish Empire, to put it this way, Latin Americans, Filipinos, and Equatorial Guineans, after 2 years of residence in Spain, they acquire automatically the Spanish citizenship. Okay, that is also going to be done with descendants of Sephardic Jews that were expelled from Spain. And many of them have stayed for more than 2 years, so they're already Spanish citizens. We're not taking special measures because of the fact that part of the workforce is immigrant. So the teaching is done in the same way, and they're giving opportunity. There are no different regulations for immigrants than for non-immigrants. So as far as employment is concerned, it's the same thing.
Hola, señor embajador. Me llamo Daniela.
¿Qué tal, Daniela?
Acaba de morirse la duquesa del Alba. ¿Cómo está tomando esto España?
Perdóname, ¿me podrías repetir cómo qué?
Que ¿Cómo está tomando la muerte de la duquesa del Alba España?
I'm sorry. The Duchess of Alba was a social figure, and they become she is the head of a very traditional Spanish family, and she is in the big social magazines. But that's it. Okay, it has no repercussions on the daily life of 99 of Spaniards, and is not going to affect in any way the life of the country. It is going to appear on the newspapers for 2 or 3 days. There'll probably be a difference, since you asked for it, as you know, between the new husband of the Duchess and the sons who did not accept that marriage very well. But it's all a matter of high society commentary. Okay.
Why is Spain not part of the coalition against ISIS?
But it is. You see, we are part of the coalition against ISIS. The coalition against, I mean, we're as concerned as anybody in the coalition against it. If you go to the southern part of Spain, a point called Tarifa, you see the north of Africa. We've had, second only to 9/11, the hardest attack by Islamic fundamentalists in March 11, 2004. That changed probably the history of the early 21st century in Spain, with an attack in Madrid through the bombing of trains in Madrid. And we're very concerned. We are cooperating. We have Spanish citizens, as you have Americans that have gone as foreign fighters, and we're following them. We have two cities that are basically Muslim in the north of Morocco, Ceuta and Melilla, and those are the ones that you see the images of sub-Saharan Africans climbing the fence, and many, 61 exactly, of those have left Spain and gone to Syria to fight for the Islamic State, and we're very concerned. We're sending in the next 2 weeks 300 Spanish military to form the military of Iraq. We still don't know. Half of them are going to be in Baghdad, the other half in Basra. We've established the Patriot unit in Turkey to protect Turkey against a possible attack, and that has been managed by Spain. It is true that this is within a NATO operation. But yes, what we're not doing, and that is, and you're right in that sense, we're not bombing. We're not other countries. We're not one of the countries that using its air force to bomb Syria or Iraq as we did in the past in Yugoslavia and in the first Iraq. In the first Iraq, we didn't do it. We did it basically in Yugoslavia in the NATO operation. But it's basically because this is not an operation, a NATO operation. It's one of those nations that's a coalition of the willing, as you know they are called. But we are one of the willing. That have it clear that we are part of the ISIS operation. But I thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. And on behalf of the World Affairs Council of Charlotte, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to come here and to talk to us about Spain and the various issues that bring both the United States and Spain together. And on behalf of the World Affairs Council, I would like to provide you with a certificate of appreciation so you can remember your visit with us here today. And we certainly thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
We certainly thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
And if you have a moment, you want to come up and say hello to the ambassador, please do. Thank you very much,
Sure, thank
Mr.
you.
Ambassador.